Oh, okay. Yeah, I was curious when it started. Okay, good to know. I love that.
We had the windstorm. Oh, that's right. I took out. That was the first one. The windstorm was the first. So even the planning, the building, and it was bad year for weather. We're kidding.
Welcome to tonight's work session. We are having a discussion with Clark Nuber, our auditors who are here. And we have been handed a, we have an audit work plan as well as a letter of engagement. And this would be an opportunity for board members to ask any questions, clarifications, and hopefully finalize our scope of work this evening. So how would everyone like to begin? Any questions, or would you like to have any concerns expressed, or what are your next steps that you'd like to see as well?
Maybe a brief introduction by the team.
Well, I'm sorry, I apologize. Let me have Dr. Watts introduce Dr. Harmon first.
Thank you, President Vengadaslam, members of the board, Ms. Holly, staff, and invited colleagues from Clark Nuber. I would like to call on our Chief Accountability Officer, Dr. Jewel Harmon, to introduce our staff and team from Clark Nuber. And if you wish to begin with an introduction or some comments to drive the conversation, and then I'll turn it back over to our board.
Okay. Sounds good.
This will be a brief introduction piece because this is billed to be a discussion between the board and Clark Nuber to finalize the scope of work and to look at the letter of engagement so that we can develop contract, exchange monies, and start the actual work. So up until this point, we've had not a lot of discussion other than they shared the revised scope of work based on our previous work session. Kind enough to also complete a draft letter of engagement, so similar to what that would look like, so you can have time to kind of provide some feedback on that as well, so that we could hopefully leave this evening with next steps of choosing to go ahead and formalize this and get the contract and the PO started on our end. And so those are the goals. You have all of the documents we have. There hasn't been any real feedback to Clark Nuber and the team that's serving us about that, because that's what the space is tonight. So I will give the floor over. If you would like, I can open, or Karen can open both the documents if you want them up, but you have them in your possession in front of you as well. So I'll turn it over to whoever would like to share or field questions. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Howdy. So when last we met, we walked through our proposed scope of work, and we got some very good feedback. There were a few holes in that scope of work, a little more work that needed to be done to refine that. So as we were going through that, it was pointed out that some of the policies and procedures that we were citing in the scope of work were your new ones, but they had also changed over time, and we did not have access to those old policies and procedures. And then I asked the question, are there other RCWs that might also come into play here? And it was pointed out that you've got some WSDA model policies and procedures that very thoroughly list what those RCWs are. So I came by the school here, we picked up a thumb drive with the old policies and procedures, the model policies and procedures, went back, went through those, and incorporated those into what you see here. So especially I think at steps 2, 3, and 4, you'll see kind of a laundry list of different RCW citations. That was what we were able to pull out of that additional documentation. And so we've incorporated all of that. We've pulled it into the proposed contract here, and happy to take any questions on that or help in any way we can.
Any questions? Anyone ready to ask questions?
I have a question, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm wondering, is there, and I apologize, I wasn't at the meeting last time, so is there kind of a schedule of perhaps when the board would be receiving updates? I see in here where you talk about connecting with management as needed, but I'm wondering about the plan for updating the board or what that looks like as you're going through the process.
Great question. We talked about that at the last meeting and talked about, what would make sense for updates. How would you like it? Would you like emails? Would you like calls? Who should be involved in those calls? And we've come up with a proposed timeline here to kick this off, assuming the contract's fine and we can jump into this. And I'll let Mike kind of walk us through what the timing of the testing would be, the next steps, and then also included in that is the timing of the updates.
Sure, thank you. So sort of our proposed timeline would be to get you guys a PBC list or a request list for all of our documents, set up our portal, and we do that with a smart sheet, and we give whoever needs access to that, and that's the place where these documents would be uploaded. So that would be our hope, would be to get you the final PBC list and everything set up for you by the end of next week. The following week, we wanted to give staff time to actually gather the documentation that we're asking for and to be able to upload that. That would be the week of the 9th. And as of now, we have good timing for the week of the 16th and the 23rd for testing to be out here on site. So that was kind of our proposal, with possibly a first update at the end of that second week, the 26th or the 27th, just to tell you how things are going and what next steps are.
Thinking about that update, is that something that, I don't want to speak for everybody else, but would you be willing to come and talk to in a work session like this? But again, knowing that it's in this type of format, but we can all be here and listen and talk at the same time.
So your preference would be to do it in a work session like
Well, I'm asking for this group's preference as well, and then of your willingness.
Because I think I remember you guys had talked about doing two of you, right? Doing updates with two of you. Is that right? What I remember?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we talked about more, if there need to be more frequent updates, that we'd indicate two people so we didn't have to schedule a meeting every time we needed an update. But for more milestone updates, do we want it in the work session format?
I think I like that. I like that. It's a good idea.
I live down the road, so I am absolutely fine with whatever you want to do.
Okay.
I have a question on the documents and the timeline. So when you were saying you have your request list for documents, I'm assuming those are documents covering all the years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just wondering, from a perspective of our staff, if that's going to be reasonable to be able to, I don't know, this, if you're talking 500 documents, or if you're talking what the scope of that looks like as far as for them to be able to actually do that in that time frame.
Great question. The list will be a comprehensive list, And once we've provided it to the staff, they can look at it and we can talk about that, what's going to be involved for them to pull that. And then we can prioritize it. We can, you know, what's the low-hanging fruit? What can they pull quickly and provide to us and keep us productively, gainfully moving through the project here during this initial block of time that we have. And then if additional time is needed for other parts of it, we can start looking at our staffing options and schedule a round 2 of coming back.
Dr. Harmon provided a bit more context.
Just because you asked about the staff piece of it. So we obviously aren't going to dedicate full-time staff to supporting this work, but I've already had a conversation with OE staff about what's coming, because they've been aware of the process. And so we've talked about where the team would be on site, making that space available. And some of their on-site time would actually be helpful for us to ensure that they're getting what they need. And if they're not, they're kind of have close access to us. So we'll work in partnership pretty heavily initially to ensure, and that it'll probably be much less of a burden in terms of that, but we're already thinking about how to manage that and support it. And so I've already had conversations with staff about what that would look like based on the scope of work and the conversation we had at the first work session.
So my questions really is about process, and so I'm wondering, I know you have now copies of the old policies and copies of the new ones, and just for clarification, the new ones don't apply at all to any of these years. So how are you going to be making those sort of recommendations? Is it going to be based on what we've done in the past and what we're doing now, or how much time is going to be dedicated to looking at past results?
As we're looking at the prior years, our documentation is going to be geared towards the policies that were in place for that particular year. We'll test against that standard, and then as standards change, we'll be testing against the newer standards. And to the extent that we have feedback related to either the old or the new, we'll incorporate that into the report.
And then I did want to clarify, I think we talked about this, but I wanted to ask how you're going to be looking at the capital expenditures. I know you have some steps here, but is that going into the purchase services that we have in our budget? Is that how you look at
The
it?
procurement process, yeah, it's looking at what your procurement process is, which type of procurement that particular capital acquisition would fall under, and then making sure you're meeting the state rules for that type of purchase.
Okay. I had a question on the reporting, and let's see. It talks about the public disclosure requirements because the documents are subject to public disclosure. And you talked about the exit conference meeting. And were you expecting board members to be part of that, a couple of board members, or what was that? Trying to understand how that would work.
So anytime we do a project like this, first off, we know that nobody wins if we haven't discussed the findings first with the accounting folks here to make sure there's no misconceptions or miscommunications. For them to first hear it when we're presenting it to you, that could, that could embarrass both of us if maybe there was just a misconception. So as we're working through the project, as issues come up, we're gonna make sure we have the facts straight. We're going to dig into it here with the accounting staff, make sure we understand what should be versus what actually happened, document that well. we're going to be having the regular updates. And in those updates, as we have preliminary findings, we're going to be discussing them with you. So you'll be hearing about some of these things as we proceed through the process. When we get to the end, we'll have the exit conference where we pull this group together and we talk through, again, how the process went. Did we get good cooperation? Did they have the support for what we were looking for? What are the preliminary findings? And then what's the process for getting that documented and ultimately issuing the final report? So that's what we would be doing at that exit conference.
President Vengadaslam, if I may for just 1 second, Mitch. I've prepared my staff in the conversations of thinking about the workload for this to let them know that as a staff, we should expect to hear the information for the first time during a work session or a regular board meeting. So they shouldn't anticipate that they would necessarily hear findings first once you've made a decision. So I prepared them for the possibility of that and the likelihood that we would hear that information as an audience member at a regular board meeting, because you all are the customer in this space. So choosing how you all decide to move forward, it's okay, and I appreciate that, but we understand that that may not be the board's preference, and we've talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, I would prefer at the exit conference that at least 2 board members are present. That's how we've done our audits in the past. Well, recently we've had a full board, but that would be the preference, I think.
Well, I would almost say for this one, because we requested it, the board should all be at the exit conference.
Then it'll be an open meeting.
Definitely our mindset on this process is we work with the management team here, we work for you.
So what is everybody's thought?
Making sure that expectation is there. I mean, I know there's the necessary thing to work with management to get the information we need, or to get the information that we've asked for, so they're doing all of that. And I understand that from a work process standpoint. But I think, yeah, us being important as knowing that any kind of outcome, any kind of thing that's reached an answer or a decision is something that we want to know about. And right, I think that's where we can, if it's more frequent information, designating 2 people or having a board member present to hear that information is good. But yeah, that any kind of thing that goes out, any kind of recommendation or change or finding, if you will, is available to the board at its first, at the determination that it's accurate and known.
And I suspect you would be having conversation with staff as you're gathering information, but the board has said that they would like to have the information first.
Okay.
So that would be preferred. Okay. So I think that's the only other change that I saw. Are there any other comments or questions?
The scope looks like still what we need. Go ahead. All right. I was like, the scope is exactly what we're looking at in the different areas. And meaning it should give us the outcome we see. I'll just ask General about timing, because I know we've shifted probably 3 months from when the first timeline we saw. So we're looking at phase 1 by September, maybe, let's say, but then phase 2 and phase 3 maybe finishing in the November timeframe, or how does that look?
Definitely. It would. That's very doable. We've got the resources lined up to really start jumping into it in the next few weeks, and our goal is to get in and out and get your folks back to doing their day-to-day stuff. But we also want to make sure we do a thorough and complete process, and also give them the time to pull the information that we need and be ready for us when we do show up. So we're as productive as we can be when we come out here. So all that to say, I think November is very doable.
So one thing I did want to mention is that I think we talked about at the last meeting, having at least 2 board members be part of the communication. And I would like to see that happen, because I think this document, we didn't know about it until later, and we'd like to be part of the decision so we can set up our meetings and move if need be. So is that something?
That was on me. I was actually out sick the last 2 weeks. That contract came out while I was homesick, and I only happened to have Dr. Harmon's email address. So I sent that to her to try to keep things moving forward, get it on your docket. I didn't have access to all my other files to send it to the other folks, so I apologize for that.
That's all right. I just wanted clarification how that process would work. So I think we talked about any pertinent information that you can't send to everybody, you would send it to 2 of us, and we would discuss it with the board at the intermittent work sessions.
Are there specific folks you would like included in those communications?
I don't know, Ross and I were at the last meeting, and we talked about just emailing us if there's
Yeah,
any
so I think
Okay.
you and I will volunteer unless someone else wants to volunteer for us. Okay.
And there'll be meetings for all of us to get up to date, I think.
Okay.
So, okay. Any other questions? All right, hearing none, do you have any other concerns or questions of the board?
Nope, just excited to get started. Mike?
Absolutely.
We are also. All right, thank you so much, Dr. Harmon, Ben, everybody, finance team, helping us get through this. Thank you for being here.
I do want to ask one last question. I'm sorry. For PBC list and stuff like that, who should that information funnel through? And-
PBC list.
Prepared by client.
The request list, the document request
Sorry.
list.
Jargon.
So I think from this standpoint, it would be visible by the 2 board members, but then whoever Dr. Watts designates, I don't want to say who you might have already designated, but whoever Dr. Watts designates as the person internally as that point of contact would be the main person to do that.
So we set up a secure portal, and anytime anything gets uploaded to that portal, the people that are set up are alerted that something gets uploaded. So if we were to set you 2 up on the smart sheet, you would get the alerts, you could log in, you could see what was there, and then we'll give the staff that ability to upload that too. But you would be notified anytime we do something to it or anytime they do something to it.
Sure.
Sounds good. It's good by me, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
Okay, thank you so much for being here, all your work. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Right, we will now,
But I want to make clear, because we talked with them, and I think we're done with that. I want to make clear, like, we give the direction to, yes, we want to finalize this, and then whatever we need to do is the next point. We're not making these approvals here, because we're not in a regular session, but that we would give the direction to finalize this and move
the
forward.
scope of work, yes.
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 I want to make that clear.
Clarification, okay.
Yeah, and do we have any type of process, so if if the document list is 500 pieces and it can't be done without dedicating somebody for a full time during that time, do we have a process as a board for staff to be able to come and say, hey, we need additional time so that timeline can be adjusted? Or how would we do that?
I don't think it's been that determined,
I know, it hasn't
Well,
been
I think we'll
determined
have
yet,
that
but
open,
but
and
if
and I'm going to look at Dr. Harmon because she's in my direct line of sight, and probably the person going to talk to most of the people. But I think that's it, is that the 2 board members that are getting the communications, if that comes up, that we can be available to have that kind of in-the-moment conversation of, look, we're having issues, amount of hours it takes to do this is going to be more than expected, what do we want to do? Kind of discussion.
Okay.
And then we can, if it's a decision about adjusting the timeline or something like that, we can bring it back here to the overall board.
No, I'm glad we're having that conversation, if I may. And I think, Dr. Harmon, I know you and I will have these follow-up conversations. The scope of work is different from a contract or a paper version to the actual work. So once we have a clearer understanding of what the human hours, the time frame, we'll have that two-way meaningful conversation to see if we're on track or not and adjust accordingly. And I'm sure we'll be working very closely with our team from Clark Nuber to make sure that is information we can get to you as soon as possible. The sooner we know, the better we'll be able to move this project forward. Thank you.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we are recessing for an executive session at 6:30 for approximately 30 minutes to discuss with legal counsel representing the district litigation or potential litigation to which the district is likely to become a party. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Doing it, so I had to have Karen, she's read that. So do you have the email that she sent, or can you access that shows the cutoff date, the start date?
Ready for the big day tomorrow?
Yeah.
Of course.
Be out force.
You're gonna be out?
Not really.
Oh.
Somebody's got to stay here and hold down the fort.
Well, you know, every now and again we have to do different things, but I used to go out here and help and do things.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you were doing something.
Yeah, no. No, I'm sure it'll be busy everywhere though.
Yeah. Hey, Brian.
How are you, sir?
Good evening. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Ready for your first
Pretty good.
board meeting?
Everything's set up? Yeah, I'm ready for it. I don't know if we'll be doing anything, but it's good to see you bright and early in the morning.
Yeah, that'll be good. I haven't seen that field in a little while, so.
Well, it's been a good summer for us, you know, so to be honest with you, it's been a great summer. So, we'll see.
Got your folks back in your office for a little while now, right? So.
Yeah, we're
we've had
back on track.
Some time with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Brian. Who are you? Welcome to the.
You know,
That's a little
we
unusual.
get to hear the agendas and things we need to change right away.
Yes.
It's been kind of natural, I suppose. It's been a learning process. So normally on nights like this, everyone just shows up at 7.
Depends, you know, like most people show up a little closer.
Okay.
They have, I don't know if you looked at the board docs, but
Yeah.
they have working meetings
Yeah.
and work sessions before this.
Mhm.
So sometimes, like say there's something going on and you may be presenting to the board in a work session. And some of those are, like they're all public work stuff. But then like cabinet meets before some of these too. And so there's several things that are staged tonight at different times that you may or may not have before the board meeting. I think that you may or may not be part of. So those guys are over there, and then the executive councils and the soup swing, finishing up whatever they're doing, and they'll come. They usually sit up here in the front.
Okay.
You'll see. Kind of depends. With the public, if it's everybody's all in the door, and then they'll be here early and signs and TV. You can imagine the drill, right? Yeah. So, I think got a lot on the agenda tonight.
52 items.
Yeah, it's long, so just kind of, sometimes they go pretty quick and sometimes they don't. I try to be here, there's 3 items on there that are from my department, so I try to be here. I'm not required to be here, but I try to be here for those so I can answer questions.
Do you jump out afterwards, or do you finish?
I stay. I think
That's kind of something you can come in,
yeah,
and then you can go.
I kind of disrespectful.
That's
But I understand, people got, especially like kids, or you got things going on, or you got projects, but that's just my personal opinion. I don't hold that against anybody. You never know, sometimes you do your part, and then something goes on, and then there's a question later, or after, during. Sometimes people are here. I very seldom go to any kind of meeting. I don't get oh, hey, I've been meaning to talk to you, or how's it going, or I got a question about this. So it's always a nice opportunity. But if there's nothing
first
going
time
on,
in here, so I'm kind of taking it all in. I'm sure you've seen it many times before. Kent Phoenix Academy, Kent Mountain View Academy. What are the two that are joining?
well, Kent Mountain View Academy moved to the Kent Phoenix Academy site,
Okay.
which used to be old Sequoia Junior High. So those two are at the same, they're not really joining, they're sharing the same location.
Is it different teaching philosophy?
Well, so the Kent Mountain View Academy is, I think, K through 8,
Oh.
and Kent Phoenix is 9
school.
through 12. High school. I don't know 100%. So the Kent Mountain, you have to apply, and there's some different, some of it's gifted, I think some of it's extra teaching, some of it's trying to keep families together. Families with needs, so that the brother and sister, or brother and brother can be together all the way up, instead of, hey, Johnny's in kindergarten and now the sibling is up in another place. So yeah, that's all come together.
That's good. Was that a lot of work for you?
Oh, yeah. A lot of work for everybody. And some are shorter, so you had to get everybody moved over to one side at Kent Phoenix, and get everybody out of Kent Mountain View, and get them down to Kent Phoenix, get them in. Some of the logistics, chairs and table heights for middle schoolers are different than third graders. And it's not set up as an elementary, so it doesn't really have a playground area. So,
That's an issue.
Kent Parks is still doing stuff there. It's a great use of the space because it's really utilized.
I suppose if you're over in Fairwood.
Well, overall, it's more centrally located because, Kent Mountain View is up on Military.
That's ways away from here. Still in Kent.
No, it's actually,
Oh,
and my
I live
wife
in
just
Des
worked for
Moines.
the district, and she was like, I need to find out how to get to this place, and I'm like, that's not a Kent, that can't be a Kent school district. I mean, like, Oh my gosh, it is. Okay, well,
It's in our school district, but it's not a Kent city.
that's correct. It's not a city of Canton. But we have Covington, Maple Valley, Renton, Canton. See that?
I still haven't met with the Covington Parks yet, I'm trying to, but, I mean, has not been easy, but it's one issue after another.
Yeah. Well, we got so much going on this year. If you had to come last year, or even the year before, we've done a lot.
Just easier
It's
training.
just, I mean, there's, you know, it's not good or bad, it's just we got NPR rooms, and schools, and grants, and projects, and
Yeah.
moving academies, and changing people, and
Yeah.
KSD 2.0, and there's just a lot of moving pieces.
I am just out of the blue question only because I was at French yesterday. I noticed that everywhere I've gone, all the portables, garbage containers, all have those nice little steps. What are the chances we can get one French?
Yeah, that's what, I've got that on my list to talk to the Capitol folks about, yeah. Because to fix that one right now, we really need to take it apart and take it down. You can't really do it up there, and that would be great.
Last.
Yeah, it would just last forever, yeah. Because that isn't a terrible, I mean, it's just always exposed to the weather. Yeah, so I would like to see that.
That would be
So
great.
whether we do some joint funds or some creative funding or some moving things around, I think that would be great. Because I don't really think it's cost effective to keep repairing it.
I would say every 5 years, there's at least one step that needs to be fixed. It's not great wood that's in there, it's just,
Well, my lead locksmith did, he's been working with the school district about, I don't know, 30-some years, he built that thing.
it works.
It works, yeah.
I'm just always worried when people are walking up.
It's like a Survivor,
Yeah,
right,
it's
going
a-
up there to the shack.
Make sure you lean the correct way, because if not, you're going over.
Yeah, my carpenter went up there and looked at that, and he thought, he mentioned that to me, and I thought, that's awesome, that's a great idea. Yeah, so I just need to talk to Jason
You
about
would
that.
know what the prices are more than I would, but.
Yeah, well, I think the first, first step is to get them out there and get a cost on it, and then see what they have that number, the conversation is kind of, pie in the sky. Yeah. But they're trying to, like I said, they're trying to get kids in school tomorrow, so I was kind of giving them a little break.
I totally get that.
That's good. Question, good comment. You said you live up in
Des Moines.
Des Moines, okay.
Yeah. And actually, one house is next door to me is a better way, but
You just come down the hill and across.
yep.
Is that how it's
277.
Oh, okay. And that's gotten better since they made that, it's on hill, yeah, that just gave me a nice.
That's a highway.
So everybody had to spin up their jank and back around the other way.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out. Harder is to drive back up and cut over to 277 rather than to maneuver through downtown. But
Well, yeah, you can go up the hill and take that first exit and come in the back way by Home Depot, just shoot.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to go all the way down,
Okay.
so you don't have to go to 272nd, where you
Yeah,
you just
yeah.
come to the
Yeah,
top of the
I know
hill.
exactly what you're
Yeah,
talking
that first, that shoots up.
And and that's that one entrance on that, you know, all of a sudden look over,
Yeah.
and someone's, whoa, here
Yeah.
he comes.
And if you get off on there, and you go, you cross back over 277th, it's not the first left, because that goes into the neighborhood, but it's the next one, then that comes over on 108th.
Okay.
So that we don't have to mess with it. Otherwise, you get in this little half street where you can either go up to 272nd or back over 108th. That's a nice little way there. And then they finished that other bridge. Panther Lake was on 216th. And it goes down the valley, and they did that bridge across 167. So now that's supposed to take some of that cross valley traffic off, so we'll see. how that impacts. snow, and I was coming up to the 270 game to work that way. I said, man, if I can make the light at the bottom of the hill, because I need the momentum to keep going. So and I was just flying, and I hit that light, and I said, okay. So I started up that way up the hill. I saw these flashing lights. Oh man, I hope this road isn't closed because I know it's coming. But I'm going, I'm starting to slip, and drop gear, I'm making it, drop gear, I'm making it, and it's a Coke truck backing down the hill because he got stuck. And so I just barely down the second and top the hill. And all right, I made it. You know, they closed it like just after I got out the hill. So I'm watching the news that night, and they actually had that truck on the news backing down that hill. I've seen that truck. Man, I was there 2 minutes before that. That'll be well, hopefully we just don't have to. This year it's been hard, but yeah, where there's a hill. And so I'm going to play to come up 18, we'll get on airport to come up. Our friends up there. But even like that Reaper Ranch, that round, that road has a round to it. So if you'll see that's what people they stop. And then they just you know. You gotta keep going. You gotta keep moving. Yeah. Oh yeah, it was terrible. I finally found the perfect, and I don't know why I didn't think of it earlier. I used to have Suburban for my house, and we're doing my stuff with patio trucks, so I got the same traffic crowd, basically back outside. And it finally hit me, Suburban, because I don't use the truck part of the truck all the time, so that's what I had to have Suburban. That's both worlds, so that's super. And I don't have to drive. I had my little diesel, and I sold it to that's a radio, you don't like this product. Diesel was like 80 cents. Yeah, charity buy
Yeah, because I haven't turned it in since March. It was worse than I thought. It was worse than I thought.
Well, I went to cheaper to make. My daughter was at the time, there was another rule. It was a portion of kids. I remember she was married at that point.
I'm just like, oh, okay.
I sort of like how see now they're just probably expensive. Yeah, well, how is it? Yeah.
Where you should walk in here, like it's, you better warm up. It doesn't look like you're not a huge crowd. Yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah. Bring it close. Here you go.
It has been up to this point. Feel pretty good about it.
Thank you so much.
I didn't get to talk to you. Yeah. That's the day that you got proposed, right? You could say,
Yeah.
I think, I don't know if it's, things like October to things like that. We can figure out how to wrap that out.
Oh, yeah, the budget book.
Yeah, we should run to that.
So yes,
We can pull this work up with Excel. You can use Excel, or what is the best? Now it's probably not here.
no, it is actually. Well, I know it, but not my problem, but I know how it works. So, the first thing that I'll probably do is figure out, from the school coordinators, where for us to ask that we have a directive, the system, and then everybody go to Excel and see. The problem is that you always have to have somebody pull everything. So automatically just happen once a day. So we'll figure that out. We started to look at that, right? Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Definitely. So getting that out. Yeah. I'll ask the question. Yeah. So pretty soon we'll make it. Yeah. Yeah, we do. Wanted you.
No, I can't. I gotta stop. It's just 1, 2, 3. I think sometimes it doesn't like numbers. I know.
Yeah, well, I can. Okay. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
If it's not, it shouldn't have any.
I know. I started it. Sorry. The yawn. Big yawn. Now it's
Maybe they were trying to finish up with the last. But some of the other, like, better
You coming tomorrow to the facility?
I actually view the agenda. I don't know why I always forget that. I click on the meeting and I have to click on view the agenda.
Oh, yes.
And Sandy got the notice and she's gonna be there, and I kinda gave her just an update, like, what is going on here, and here's why they're asking you, so.
Well, that's not 5 minutes.
I have Yeah, they're all PDFs, so when you want
PowerPoint
to,
isn't a PDF, is it?
there's no PowerPoint here.
Huh?
There's no PowerPoint.
I just went online a second ago. Do a refresh.
It's gonna be a quick one, right, Debbie?
I did not see a PowerPoint when I was downloading that stuff. PDF. Oh, that was not there.
Yeah, I think I know why. The presentation that was loaded for last week,
Yeah.
Jewel had taken out like 5 slides. The one that was loaded for this week, those slides are still in there. So Betty replaced it with the one where the slides are taken out, so it mirrors last week's.
Oh. So, okay, so I will, that was not
So
there.
PowerPoint, PDF.
Okay.
I am not going to scroll them through the PDFs. It's just going to be that they have them.
Okay.
But I am going to scroll them through them.
Let's see.
We'll be fine.
I would have had this saved, but it wasn't there.
Yeah, that's fine. Relax. You and I both have bigger problems than this thing saving.
Oh, okay.
This sound.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to all of you tonight, and we're very excited to begin our new school year, and thank you for being here this evening. We are going to ask Mr. Gordon Cook to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Well, welcome again, and this is the meeting of the Kent School District Board, which is held in public to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. So I want to begin with a few process for audience participation. The purpose of board meetings is for the board to conduct its business in public. During the meeting, the board will listen to but not respond to comments from visitors. Those wishing to comment must complete a comment card and give it to the board secretary before the meeting begins, or no later than agenda item 3.0 presentations. No cards will be accepted once presentations have begun. Abuse of public comments personally directed toward staff members will not be tolerated. The president may interrupt or terminate an individual statement when it's too lengthy, obscene, or irrelevant. And when it is your turn to address the board, please state your name at the start of your testimony. Please limit your remarks to 3 minutes, and you will hear a timer when 3 minutes are up. Visitors who have completed a comment card indicating a desire to speak to an agenda item will be called at that portion of the agenda. And per board procedure, written material to provide board members with background information should be submitted to the superintendent's office at least 1 week in advance of the meeting. All right. And with that, Dr. Watts, are there any changes to the agenda this evening?
Yes, President Venkatasalam, members of the board, Ms. Holly, staff and community, a supplemental personnel report has been added to the consent agenda, and a copy which is on the dais.
All right. This time I'd like to ask a board member to make a motion to accept supplemental agenda, please.
I so move to accept the supplemental agenda.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded to approve the supplemental personnel report. Are there any discussions or questions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye and raise your right hand. Aye. All those opposed say no and raise your right hand. The motion passes. Next up is our 2.0 superintendent's report. Dr. Watts, please.
Yes, once again, President Venkatasalam, members of the board, Ms. Holly, and community, it is not lost on me that tomorrow's a special day. Tomorrow, August 29th, we are officially open for inspiration. It marks the beginning of yet another school year, and I am honored to begin my 5th year as our superintendent, and I proudly serve alongside some very talented, some very joyful, smart, hilarious, and thoughtful school-based central administration and school board leaders. We're excited to join the more than 25,000 young people and more than 3,600 older young people in support of our core business of teaching and learning with an emphasis on learning. And that learning emphasis is not only designated for our students. We know, in fact, through the past week, several weeks, specifically the week of August 12th, provided our district-wide professional learning opportunities for our teachers, for our paraeducators, our principals, our assistant principals, as well as district administration leaders and support staff. And as we welcome each and every student, including the bookend classes, and what I mean by that, from our rising senior class of 2020 to our budding kindergarten class of 2032, we must establish a sense of urgency and a commitment to continuous improvement because time is limited, literally. In fact, beginning tomorrow, our kindergarten students will only have 2,340 school days with us. We must make each moment count. And so our respective communities and teams, many of whom are represented this evening in front of you, we remain committed. We remain committed to creating learning environments that are welcoming, challenging, and full of care. We remain committed to increasing opportunities for two-way, meaningful communication that supports teaching and learning. We remain committed to refining organizational systems and structures, and we remain committed to improving recruitment, hiring, and retention practices, all for the purpose of ensuring that our students, each and every one, our staff, our families, get what they need when they need it. This is the simple and profound description of equity that we learned and that was shared with us by esteemed author, speaker, and professor of San Francisco State University, Dr. Jeff Duncan Adrande, during our Talk 2019, Talk standing for Teaching and Learning in Kent School District, our signature learning event. That said, here are just a few highlights that describe the incredible efforts that should help KSD in our quest to become a school district with the fastest improving student performance results. In line with our strategic goal 1, and I will use this superintendent's report each opportunity to share how we live out our core values, how we live out our strategic goals, and I will focus on strategic goal 1 this evening. Strategic goal 1, teaching and learning, student success. To prepare all students to be college and career ready, by raising the academic and social learning bar and closing the gaps to student achievement and college completion. To do that, we have exceptional leaders who are helping our other exceptional leaders in our classrooms and learning environments to help our students based on high-impact instructional strategies, otherwise known as HITs. And as I've said, when we're doing this well, they will be referred to as the greatest HITs. And those HITs include focus for this particular school year, setting goals, which is one high-impact strategy. When we set goals and we understand where we are and where we want to be, we're more inclined to achieve them. Feedback. When we receive immediate, constant feedback letting us know how we're doing, where we're heading. Are we heading in the right direction, or are we falling behind? We're more inclined to know exactly how to adjust. And metacognition, that's thinking on thinking. Do we know why we're learning what we're learning? And do we understand its purpose? Those lesson designs are now being embedded in each of the strategies, and each school will have access to training plans that can be led by school staff in addition to monthly training, embedded connections and curriculum frameworks so students know what they should learn and be able to do, and after-school training options are available for our leaders. In middle school at Mill Creek, we've enrolled approximately 55 students already for our dual language program that's multilingual education team has developed. A meeting cadence with our school-based team to coordinate and plan for the opening of school tomorrow, 1920. And finally, our PDSA, Plan, Do, Study, Act, our continuous improvement cycle. This is to ensure that we are doing what only human beings can do. We're not perfect, and because we're not perfect, the best that we can do is constantly improve. And Teaching and Learning will continue to train school teams on Plan, Do, Study, Act, as we've had deep learning about our data systems, and we understand where our students are, more importantly, where they need to be. The Teaching and Learning community and Student Family Support Services team are partnering to build a comprehensive multi-tiered systems of support. So we talk about academic learning. We cannot refer to academic learning without social and emotional supports. These academic and behavioral interventions will support each and every one of our children as they join us tomorrow officially for the 2019-2020 academic year. Proud to serve and look forward to meeting and greeting some of our directors of first impressions tomorrow at 5:30 a.m. before our big yellow buses hit the streets, and to see several of our school leaders in and on campuses. Thank you so much. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Watts. Get to join Dr. Watts tomorrow morning. Anybody else? 5:30?
All right.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Watts.
Thank you.
We will now go into our presentations, 3.01, our 2019-2020 budget presentation. Mr. Ben Rarick will present the 2019-20 district budget.
Good evening, board members. I am before you again to discuss the adoption of the 2019-2020 budget. Now, just to set the stage here, these materials you've seen before, right? So if you sense that I'm going quickly, I am, because I don't want to be redundant to this audience, but I'm also sensitive to the fact that we have members of the audience and people online who are maybe also watching this for the first time. So it is a balance. If you're wondering why is he giving the same presentation, it really is, it's for the broader community as well as for the board, of course. But I will be trying to be more brief, perhaps. But the one thing that I would like to do in this presentation that we didn't do last time is, because you now have all the documents before you, including the resolution, let's itemize those and be clear about what they are. So you have the budget book, which you should be familiar with, and indeed you are the primary audience for the budget book. There's a lot of work that goes into the compilation of that book by Ms. Tyler and her team, and I want to acknowledge that. And it's meant to be a more user-friendly version, the F-195 being the more technical rendition of the budget. You also have the F-195 in a PDF version, and that, I believe, includes the 4-year outlook, the F-195F. And you also have the resolution, which is Resolution 1563. And as we've discussed before, essentially what you are doing with that resolution is adopting expenditure limits. You are telling the management of the board that they may not exceed a certain level of authority. And if you wanted to essentially check those numbers, what you would do is take your F-195 document. Right on the first page is the fund summary page, and you would be able to tie those 5 numbers from the fund summary page right to the resolution. I know, because I've done it several times. I know they're correct. Any questions about the documents before you before we begin the presentation?
We're good.
Okay. Okay, so before we talk about the budget, I wanted to take a look back and ground ourselves in the 5 goals that we discussed last year. We called them the 5 goals for finance. And so remember that our goals were first to not only get, but also sustain a 5% fund balance under board policy, to eliminate our interfund loan to essentially address our cash flow issues in the general fund, to eliminate our operating deficit, meaning that we're bringing in more than we're spending in any particular year, to improve our bond rating, and to further explore the connections of how we spend our money and our commitments to equity in our district blue plan. And we have done that in a number of ways, which I'd be happy to talk about if we want to expand on that. Here's kind of my visual rendition of where we are with those 5 goals. We will have a 5% fund balance this year, and we think perhaps fairly healthily. The question is, will we be able to sustain that? But I just want to take a moment to say how momentous that really is. That not too long ago, you were $7 million in arrears and didn't have enough cash to make it through a school year. So significant progress that we need to communicate to all of our stakeholders. We did, in fact, eliminate the interfund loan last year, and we believe, based on our current cash situation, that we will not have to renew that interfund loan in the immediate future. Again, very significant progress. Bond rating is a little different situation in the sense that it's easy to be dropped. It's hard to get moved up. There's a delay in the process. So while I expect our bond rating to go north rather than south, it will take a while before bond raters truly take note of our financial trajectory. We did, in fact, eliminate we are most certainly going to eliminate our operating deficit for the current year. And then we've made significant progress on some of the equity levers within our budget. One of the things we do when we do the 1-year and the 4-year budget is think about our district and think about events in our district that are shaping our district that may have financial reverberations one way or the other. This is a list of those. While we're heartened by our current financial trajectory, the levy that is before us, everything rests on it. I mean, it is absolutely essential that we be thorough and successful ultimately in our levy this coming year. We have graduation requirements to reckon with. We're opening a new school in the 2021-22 school year. We have a bond sale this fall. We have collective bargaining with some of our largest units. We are implementing new school employee benefits, and we are dealing with new state mandates. And so, reminding you that, of course, by August 31st of each year, you have to adopt a budget. You do that by virtue of resolution, which establishes those expenditure limits. We may not exceed those limits unless we come back to you with an F-200, which we did last year for the first time, I think, in 10 years in Kent. Of course, by the time we get here, we've been through a long process, including 3 work sessions in the spring and early summer, going through both legislative changes, proposed revenues, and then where we're at with staffing and expenditures. And tonight we are here for our second hearing, which have been publicly noticed as required under law. You're not just adopting the general fund. You are adopting 5 funds, and we've been over what those 5 funds and what they do. And this, I would suggest to you, is a good 1-page cheat sheet reference. If there was 1 page in this entire presentation that would be good to kind of keep in the fold of your folder, this would be the one. It's a summary of all 5 funds and you would be able to track the expenditure line in E to the resolution amounts included in Resolution 1563. Okay? What follows now are a series of pie charts and then some more detailed data tables that are the underlying data for those. Give me just a moment to get to my notes, if you would. Okay, so what's noteworthy here from a revenue standpoint is that we are now, with the change in local property tax policy and the increase in state funding, we now exceed 80% as a district in terms of the amount of money both from state general and state special purpose that comes to the Kent School District. And that's, I believe, a landmark we've never hit before. What you see here is the underlying data to that pie chart. A couple things to note. Really the significant change, as you see last year, change from this year to last year in the 18-19 budget, isn't so much growth, as you see, obviously a drop in local property taxes and a fairly modest increase in state general purpose, but state special purpose revenues continue to grow significantly, and the largest of those are special education. Remember the formula change the legislature enacted? LAP and bilingual programs, pupil transportation, et cetera. Okay, this is an overview of expenditures by program, which you can slice many different ways. It's essentially 90% of this is in 4 programs. Your instructional program, special education, compensatory education, as was probed into by the chair, and support services. And here's the data table for that. Excuse me. And you will see increases in spending in some of these compensatory education programs kind of commensurate with the funding increases that we have heard about. The one thing that I would note that I didn't note last time is you see a reduction in career and technical education budget, and you may infer from that that that's a cut to the program. It is not. We were over budgeted in career and technical education this year. We are adjusting that budget down. We don't expect spending to actually reduce commensurately, okay? So I wouldn't want you to misinterpret that as something against career and technical education. Okay. Expenditures by object. No surprise here. This is pretty much how every school district looks. Perhaps the thing of note here is that payroll taxes and benefits at 24.15% is probably the piece of the pie that is expanding the most over the last 5 years for the increasing costs of benefits, not just health benefits, but benefits overall. Okay, and then this is the detail data underlying that. Similarly, here you see a reduction in materials and supplies. Again, I didn't want you to infer that that is a cut to classroom supplies in the schools. It reflects nothing of the sort. What it does reflect is that last year, when we experienced significant funding increases in our categorical programs, a greater percentage of that money went towards MSOC expenditures than this year. More of that is now going to salary. Okay, but in terms of the amount that is allocated to schools for the things that you think about in terms of classroom supplies is not changing. Okay, we remain at about 81% of personnel costs as a function of our total budget. I did want to take a note, and I know you'll remember this, but for the benefit of our broader audience, I do occasionally get questions about contract services. Why are contract services so high? Why do we have so many consultants? And I just want to take a moment to demystify some of that. And that is that consultants, or what we think of as like professional consultants, is a very, very small percentage of this category of contract services. And in fact, really the major cost centers of that category are things like running start payments. So every time we send a child to Green River Community College, that goes in the form of a contract hundreds of thousands of dollars every year as a contracted service, but in fact, an educational service that we may not think of in that category. Our utility bills, our insurance payments, anytime we have out-of-district placements for special education tuition services, it's actually a much broader array of services than what one might initially think. Okay, now I wanted to go over the staffing assumptions in this budget. Okay, this is a 3-year look of actuals and a final year look at budget. Okay, so a couple of takeaways. First thing being that the actuals from fiscal year 17 going forward are down, both from a certificated and classified standpoint. So in raw numbers, we're staffing less, we are leaner. And then from a budget standpoint, year to year, when you take 18-19 budget and compare it to 19-20 budget, we're down in overall staffing. Excuse me, got it switched around. We are up in overall staffing. We are down in basic ed staffing, okay? So from 2 years ago, we're down 17.7 for classified and 117.3 for certificated. And then this is the data that unpacks that a bit. So it's important to note, you see staffing go up and you would become alarmed, like, why are we increasing staffing so much? But remember, it is as much about where we fund the staffing out of as much as how much staffing we have. So remember early in the presentation where we talked about large funding increases in these compensatory and categorical accounts. Those monies get spent with staff, right? So this has, in effect, allowed us to reduce our reliance and our leverage on basic ed funding and leverage those categorical dollars. So total staffing is up, basic education staffing is down. It's down 55.3, and the vast majority of that is on the certificated side. Any questions about that? Okay. Okay, enrollment, a very, very important part of our journey. We're all waiting with bated breath next week to see all the students showing up in our schools. Here's 5 look-fors as we continue to analyze enrollment in this somewhat new landscape. We'll be keenly interested in the first week to see if the slide from last year has leveled or not. Grades 6 or 7 continue to be something of an anomaly. If you looked at those charts we provided you, almost all grades were down. Grades 6 and 7 were up. We could not explain why for those particular grades they were up. We will look to see if that continues to be a trend. ELL enrollment, not just in Kent, but in the region, is down. And our demographer thought may have had something to do with the overall enrollment decline that we experienced last year as a kind of a larger, I don't want to go into it, but the cultural dynamic, political dynamic as it relates to our language learners and some of our immigrant populations. We have a charter school closure, and then we have several housing developments that we're keeping an eye on that we think will have less of a profound impact this coming school year, but probably more so in the spring and definitely at the beginning of the next school year. Okay, this is the data chart for enrollment that you've seen many, by now your eye is acclimated to this chart. The one thing I wanted to note is, of course, we had a significant difference between what we thought enrollment was going to be last year and what it ended up being. And you see a 91 number there. That is from the revised budget, right? This first year you had a revised F200 budget. But from the revised, we ended up as a total being about 150 students off, which is good. And a good deal of that being Runny Start, which impacts us different financially. Okay, budget to budget, we're projecting to be down 136.7 students for K-12 general enrollment and 172 overall. That's budget to budget, not actual to actual. Okay. And then we've spoken at great length about the general fund. You are taking an action commensurate with 5 funds, and those are as follows. Take a moment to say that, and I believe we went over this last time, this is a big year for capital projects. We had a bond sale last year. We will have another bond sale this year. Capital is in a fund balance position, as it should be. And so this year, we anticipate spending in the neighborhood of $135 million on capital projects, which is good and appropriate in the landscape of the money that we have raised. So we're just at that point where this is a big year for the capital projects fund. We'll spend about twice as much next year on capital projects as we show as having spent in 18-19 budget, excuse me, not spent, budgeted for. And here's that list that you've seen many times, that some of the things, of course, the biggest being the construction of the New Valley Elementary School, but a whole host of other projects as well. Okay, the debt service fund, it's quite technical. Essentially what it is we are looking at the bonds that we have sold and the schedule of repaying those bonds and the rates at which we collect from taxpayers to make good on our debt. And so that is almost entirely a math calculation that is driven by what we're doing in the capital environment. Probably the most significant event there is that we will sell $45 to $50 million in the fall, and that will impact our calendar year 2020 debt service rates to some extent. Transportation Vehicle Fund, maybe an executive summary of this is 6 buses. There's a plan to purchase perhaps 5 or 6 buses over the year, and this is driven by the amount of funding that Kent gets from depreciation payments from the state to do so. I don't know if it's 5 or 6 at this moment, but it's going to be 5 or 6 buses. Okay, we actually spent a fair amount of time on the ASB fund last time. Unless there are any questions, I will not go back over those, but I do want to spend some time on this slide, again, for the benefit of our community, as well as I know you've heard this before. There's some key assumptions that underlie this budget that need to be clear. This pertains to calendar year 2020 property tax levy. The legislature passed a law enabling districts to go out and ask for more authority to levy taxes than they were able to do so previously. Districts have been making different decisions. Do they or don't they go back out and take advantage of that new law? This budget assumes the following. A, that we do not do that. We do not go out for a piggyback levy, as we've been referring to it, a supplemental levy. This budget will be based entirely on the authority that was previously granted by the voters of the Kent School District. But B, it does assume that we collect all that the voters have authorized. And the law prevented us from collecting all that the voters had previously authorized. So there's a subsequent action by the board, I believe in November or December, where you will certify to the county that this is the amount. And when you do that, you will certify to that higher amount, still commensurate with what the voters have already authorized. So no need to go back to the community, at least insofar as we're talking about calendar year 2020. That is an important point. Any questions about that? Okay. Okay, and then the final point is that this is the year that we have to implement the subfund. It's a difficult process. Turned out to be a very manual process for my team. And it's actually also kind of hard to explain a little bit. And so we tried to think about different graphs that would at least give you an overview of the approach. And so remember, the subfund is basically a way to show the local community how are we spending the local proceeds that go to school districts, not just local taxes, but all local proceeds. And so what this does is the individual bar charts are types of object of expenditure, right? And the dark blue is showing you what proportion of the total costs for that object of expenditure will be in the subfund. And so by just kind of eyeballing it, you would say, okay, it looks like our local subfund is paying for quite a bit of classified staff and quite a bit of contracted services. And that would be correct. So visually, that was just meant to give you a high point about what the approach is. After you wade through all the laws and regulations, you're very limited actually in terms of, it kind of leads you to an approach. The state funds a certain amount, whatever you do over that, you essentially end up putting into the levy subfund. So that was the more shortened version, but also with the expectation that you may have questions. So I am happy to entertain those with my colleague Lisa Tyler.
And I can't find it in the budget quickly, but the 4-year plan.
Yes.
And so I noticed that as we get into year 3,
Yes.
we've dipped significantly.
Yeah.
And by 4, we're back in the negative. So
Yes.
just kind of wondering what types of things we're taking into consideration now
Sure.
for that.
Great. So these 4-year budgets are difficult. I mean, let's be honest about projecting expenditures 4 years from now. I think so. Let's acknowledge that. For that reason, I've tried to make it a little more scientific, like just to have some basic assumptions that everybody can verify. So here's what I did. For enrollment, we took a look at our demography report and kind of used a rolling average to say, okay, we're going to project 1% enrollment growth over the years of this, which is roughly commensurate with what we saw from the demography report. Although it's not exactly 1% each year, we made it a smoother 1% assumption. On the revenue side, I merely went to the OSPI multi-year tool and said their assumptions are just fine for me. So when they talk about compensation adjustments at the level of IPD and they estimate those, I just borrowed those and said I wouldn't, I wouldn't be able to do any better than what they have essentially projected. On the and then on the levy, I assumed that we renewed our levy, but I assumed a flat levy renewal amount. Okay. On the spend side, here's where it gets a little more challenging because you're trying to figure out whether your 4-year plan is supposed to be aspirational or realistic. So if you're doing a realistic 4-year outlook, you're basing it on your past behavior. Not what you think you might do, but historically what you have done, okay? And so what I did is I took the consumer price index for each of those years, and I adjusted expenditures associated with that annual inflation rate, and then I made 2 changes to that, so kind of in addition to. One is that I know that when we opened the New Valley School in 2021-22, I believe it is, that is not a replacement school. That's a new school. You're staffing a whole new school. You have costs. It's not replacement, it's additive, right? And so for that year, I expect essentially to have another whole school budget in essence. Hard to project with precision exactly how much of that is wholly new and how much of that is rezoning. But I took a $2.5 million adjustment, which I expect to be a little on the high side, but just shows an assumption that we know that in that year, we're going to have more expense without necessarily getting new revenue. We're not necessarily saying we're going to get new kids out of having a new school. We're just housing them differently, right? The second thing is that in the 2020-2021 year, we are still dealing with state mandates, okay? And the year, I'm going to have to resist giving you so much detail here, but we have a ramp up on our health benefit costs. I know there's people that are saying there's a lot of savings here. I'm not buying it. So we have a school year coming up where we will do this new program for half the year. And we will have a blended rate for 3 different periods of health benefit allocation. Pre-January, January to July, July to August. The next year, there's no blended rate. It's all at the higher rate, right? And it's for the full year. And so I have built in the assumption that we will have a stair step up so that 2020, 2021 is essentially the full-borne costs of that new program. The majority of which is paying full health benefit costs for part-time employees. There is, as has been said publicly a couple times, there are some opportunities that we may be able to save some money as well. I think the costs well outweigh the savings, and I'm very careful about assuming savings that I haven't actually seen. So that's the kind of the general approach. Unless I had a very specific dollar number, I tried to tie to either the OSPI tool or an inflationary factor.
Thank you.
No, because all my questions were answered. I love my budget book, so thank you.
Ben, will you just on slide, the ASB
Yes.
fund, you explained it to us, but just in case people didn't hear it the first time around.
Sure.
And for the audience, on the clubs, the amount of money has been reduced for clubs
Yeah.
and classes, I believe, too.
Sure.
Yeah, just, that's gone up in classes.
Sure.
Could you explain the athletics, I guess, so explain that for our.
So first of all, we don't, it would be important to not interpret this as a cut to the ASB budget. So ASBs are self-sustaining. They raise money and they spend money. And if we want to get to any depth, I'm going to defer to my team member who actually gets into the details of these budgets. But in essence, we try to be generous on the authority side in case they raise more money than they thought they would, that they would have the authority to spend it all. And so the kids put these budgets together. And so it might, and you see all these negatives, you think the district is somehow cutting the programs of the kids or the clubs. In reality, these are probably the best assumptions about what the proceeds from ASB cards and fundraisers and all these things are actually going to be. And then the actual expenditures typically quite a bit less than that budget, simply because they may have had, I think to borrow Lisa's phrase, they have real grand aspirations for a car wash or whatever, and they may do one of them but not two of them, and then spending comes in well short of that. So we're completely supportive of these programs, and those negatives do not reflect some sort of cut at a central office level to prevent these programs from flourishing. It's more of a level set, frankly.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
So, Ben, I have several questions. First one is the 3.5 million transfer in and out.
Yes.
Could you give an explanation of that? I mean, we know what it is,
Yep.
but I have a feeling it'll come up again.
Mhm, you think?
And I'd like to address it before it comes up.
Sure.
So,
Just to say what it is?
yes.
Okay.
And if you want to give historical context.
Sure. I don't, yeah, I'll try to get through that. The 3.5, there's actually, what slide are you on where you see that, by the way, if you may?
That was on it was early on.
Okay. I think there's a slide where it shows two sets of transfers that are happening. There's one with
It's early.
Transportation Vehicle Fund. Lisa, do you know what slide that is?
It's a very brief, that's
That
the
one.
one. That
Yep.
one right there, yeah.
Sure. So there's actually two sets of transfers happening, not just with capital, but also with debt service. There's funding that goes from debt service to the Transportation Vehicle Fund to replenish the payment for buses that was incurred with non-voting debt. Long story, we can get into it if you want it. But we've had that for a while. The $3.5 million is quite a journey, but really if you can take yourself outside the walls of Kent, this is not an unusual thing. This is not at all an unusual thing. Most of the larger Puget Sound area districts that I know of do this. Seattle does it in excess of $20 million. And what it is, and I considered it rather an oddity in the law, but it's the law nevertheless, is that the legislature wrote a law about a decade ago saying that their definition of capital projects expenditures includes a few things that may not be true in other states, which is happens all the time. States can define that as they wish. And they included such thing as software licenses. They included such things as software license is the biggest example. I could think of more, but the oddity comes in when, you would normally think, and frankly, I think most people thought, that if you're going to pay for a software license out of the Capital Projects Fund, then you would transfer the expense, right? So if you have a license that costs $10,000, you would just take the expense, $10,000, take it out of the general fund, move it over to the capital fund, you're done. Except for that's not how the law reads. The law says that if they're ongoing expenses, you move the revenue, not the expense. The reason for that, and the historical legacy of, is not entirely clear to me, but it's clear in the law that that's what you do. So you end up doing a revenue transfer, but in spirit, it's a transfer of expense, right? These are expenses that were incurred in the general fund that you want the capital projects fund to pay for, but they don't actually transfer to the capital projects fund. You move the revenue of the general fund increases. Again, not unusual. I was relatively surprised by, for something not that unusual, why it was such a thing, but it was. I think we've gotten through that. As you know, the state auditor spent about $100,000 actually, combing through literally every single transaction. And so what that $3.5 million is, and we talked about this in the spring, that's the maximum authority. I don't anticipate that we will actually move $3.5 million in revenue between those accounts, but that is the high water mark of what would transpire. And I hope that's
good.
Helpful.
That's good. Very good. Thank you. All right. So I wanted to also thank you for the 10-year historical comparison, talking about the levy and that was really helpful to see in terms of assessed value where we were at and where we are now, and why we went into those deficits, and we can see the trends there. So I appreciated that. Had a couple of questions on the line items. One was the 1.7 million in middle school CTE, and I'm wondering if we've talked about, and that could be for staff.
Can you give me a slide number?
About anything specific? I think it was page 12 of the budget.
Oh, the budget book?
Yeah.
Okay.
The budget book. Just kind of curious about some of the line items. What are we looking at? Are we looking at any particular program? Or I'm excited to see CTE in middle schools be a focus, but I'm just curious, has there been any discussions?
You said page 12?
I believe it's on page 12. That's what I have noted.
Okay.
General fund expenditures by program, and it's
Yes.
program 34.
Okay.
Page 12 of the budget, not this one. If you need to get back, that's fine, too. I wanted to understand the specifics of that.
I'm not necessarily prepared to speak to the details at this time, but the majority of that at the middle school level would be for staff. I believe Lori has added 2 new middle school CTE programs, too. So getting those courses up to speed and staff.
Thank you.
So our CTE middle school programs have always been in place, so it's just a standard sort of budgeting to support those programs.
It's gone up quite a bit, I think, so that's why I was wondering what's something up there.
That's right, so we're looking at like 500,000, 3 years ago, but now 1.7 million.
0.7 million.
So I'll have to unpack that specifically, but I believe she's correct with staffing.
Okay, all right, thank you. So I wanted to make sure I understood that this expenditure budget includes contingency funds.
It does.
Right? Okay, so.
It does.
So if the K through 3, if there are additional students who arrive, because from what I understand right now, we are fully budgeted to meet that. But if there were additional students to arrive, would we draw down the contingency? Would we look at the local subfund? How would that work?
Well, if more students arrive, then that's more funding. So that would actually be a positive thing, as we know. But yes, we would need to look at possibly contingency, and then if we needed to look at bringing on more staff, we'd have to look at that through the budgeting process. But we do expect to comply with the enrollment projection numbers we've been provided.
Okay, okay, that's good. And then, let's see. I think that's it. So then I wanted to thank Lisa and for you been putting together this compensatory education charts, and I guess what is really enlightening from this is that that it does show we're leveraging additional staff in the compensatory education program, and so and it said that we were underutilizing it in previous years, right? So is that correct? We were underutilizing.
What I would say is that we will not, my sense from the current year is that we will not be through our base and rollover allocation. And so what I meant by that is that, remember last year, remember when you saw the decline in MSOC funding, I was explaining that it's really about the mix of how much of the categorical money we were spending on MSOC. So this year, or excuse me, next year, the year we are budgeting for, a greater percentage of that money is going to fund staff. So by underleveraged, I mean from a staffing standpoint, we will be covering more staff with the same dollars. Okay. Or slightly more dollars, but.
Okay. All right. And then I do appreciate that this analysis kind of looking at that our biggest pockets of staffing is for the lab Title I bilingual.
Yep.
And just trying to understand why that classified staff has gone up versus our certificated.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really good chart for the public to see as well. And so I don't know how we're doing this on our website.
Yeah, so we put that chart somewhere in, there's a version of that chart. I'll get back to you, but we have included it in one of the, I think it's the budget book.
The budget books, okay, great. All right, well, thank you so much.
Page 19.
Page 19, all right. Perfect, I didn't see that, but thank you. And I think that's it for me. Are there any other questions, comments?
Very nicely done.
Great, great.
Thank you.
We're in a good spot.
Yes, we really appreciate everybody's questions being answered.
Good.
Timely manner, and thank you for that. All right.
Great, thank you so much.
We will move to our 4.0 public hearing, and I want to preface by saying that last week we had a public hearing, and historically, we have never had 2 public hearings. This was the first year, and it was done in response to the public inquiring about, sorry, not in response to public, but to address the public concern that there hasn't been enough time to discuss the budget. And so, unfortunately, some of the documents didn't go up on the correct board doc site, but it was our first hearing, and we are now to our second public hearing for the 2019-20 district budget. All right.
Clarification for Chair.
Sorry.
It's actually a continuation of the previous meeting. It's not a separate meeting.
Okay, so I was going to ask for a motion to reopen the public hearing.
I so move that we reopen the public hearing.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, a motion has been made and seconded to reopen the public hearing. And are there any other discussions or questions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
All those opposed say no and raise your right hand. All right, motion passes. We will now receive comments on the 2019-2020 budget adoption. Any person wishing to submit written or spoken comments regarding the proposed budget may do so at this time. Are there any comments? All right, it looks like, Ben, you've done a remarkable job. We do not have any comments, and so we will ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
I so move that we close the public hearing.
Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second.
All right, a motion has been made and seconded to close the public hearing. Are there any discussions or questions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye and raise your right hand. Aye. All those opposed say no and raise your right hand. A motion passes. The hearing is now closed. All right. We will now move on to 5.0 Board of Directors discussion and approval. And the first step is our 5.01 Resolution 1563, our 2019-20 budget adoption. I'd like to ask a board member to make a motion to approve budget adoption 2019 to 2020.
I move that we approve Resolution 1563, approving the district's 1920 budget.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded to approve Resolution number 1563, our 2019-20 budget adoption. Are there any discussions or questions? Calling for a vote. All those in favor say aye and raise your right hand. Aye. All those opposed say no and raise your right hand. Okay, motion passes. 5.02, our maintenance operations replacement vehicle purchase. I'd like to ask a board member to make a motion, please.
I move that we award the maintenance and operation replacement vehicle purchase to Larson's Auto Group in the amount of $40,985.18.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded to approve our maintenance operations replacement vehicle purchase. Are there any discussions or questions? Calling for a vote. All those in favor say aye and raise your right hand. Aye. All those opposed say no and raise your right hand. Motion passes. 5.03 is the HVAC filters for all sites for 2019-20, acceptance of contract with Total Filtration. I'd like to ask a board member to make a motion, please.
I move that we approve the total filtration in the amount of $120,000, including tax, for the HVAC filter orders.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, a motion has been made and seconded to approve the HVAC filters for all sites for 2019-20. And are there any discussions or questions?
I have a general question. How often do we normally replace our HVAC filters? Is it once a year? Is it just continuous as needed? And therefore, this is the contract to help do that?
Thank you, board members.
Yes, we can hear you.
right, very good.
Everyone can hear you.
All right, very good, better. We used to change filters just on a calendar schedule, and a few years ago, we changed that, and what we do is check them 3 times a year now, and if they need to be changed, then we change them. So we're saving some money there. And then, because it's not a set schedule, it kind of depends on, is it a street side, is it near a sand playground? So that's where that is. Last year we budgeted for 120 and spent about 7,000 less than that, but it kind of ebbs and flows depending on the need.
Okay.
Okay.
Tremendous, thank you.
All right, so, thank you. All those in favor say aye and raise your right hand. Aye. All those opposed, say no, raise your right hand. Okay, motion passes. We're up to 5.04, our self-leveling floor install at Meridian Middle School. Acceptance and award of contract. I'd like to ask a board member to make a motion, please.
I move that we approve the contract for the self-leveling floor for Meridian Middle School and award the contract to CNC Diversified in the amount of $78,606 to include tax.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded to approve our self-leveling floor install at Meridian Middle School and awarding of the contract. Are there any discussions or questions?
I have a question about the funds from this. It says mentioned usually in general funds, but this seems like a capital project fund type expense, and so I just want to understand that distinction.
Thank you, Dave.
That would be a great question. So the definition of capital is anything that is new. This actually would be a repair. So since it's a repair, it would have to come out of general fund. We could not use capital funds for that.
Gotcha. Because you mentioned here it was damaged during flooding, so this is a repair of that.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I have a question too. Don't go away, Dave.
Yes, ma'am.
How much of where is this in Meridian?
I will have Gordon come up to that because I believe it's right in the center where the flood came in.
Okay.
This repair, excuse me, is in the cafeteria. So it was the cafeteria gym of the original building before the new gym was added. So that's where this repair is. And a large portion of this is going to be covered with the insurance claim.
And how much of the school year is this going to take up? How long is this going to take to?
The floor has been poured, and so we did that. This originally started as an emergency repair back in November of last year. The contractor that was originally doing the work, we gave them a couple times to try, and they couldn't get it done. So we decided to have it done a couple weeks ago so that we could have the floor done and level before school started. It's going to be topped with a Mondo floor, which is like a rubber floor, which you see in Covington Elementary and Panther Lake, and we're going to do that in October. But we wanted to get the floor in so that it's functional and safe.
Functional is the word that I was looking for. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye and raise your right hand. Aye. All those opposed say no and raise your right hand. Right, motion passes. 5.05, our Kent Phoenix Academy Ingenuity contract. I did ask this be on our discussion and approval in case anyone had any questions, but let's see, I'd like to ask a board member to make a motion to approve our Ingenuity contract.
I move that we approve the contract with Ingenuity totaling up to $299,780 for the 1920 school year.
All right, is there a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded to approve the Kent Phoenix Academy Ingenuity contract, which has been in place for 10 years, I believe. Yes. Okay. Are there any discussions or questions?
So at the bottom, it says, Ingenuity will audit enrollment count throughout the year. If more enrollments are found to be in use and purchased, Ingenuity will invoice the customer for the additional usage. Are we accounting for possible contingency? I mean,
that would be based on licenses. So if we have more students that are going to be using Ingenuity, then they would invoice us for that.
and this is just for KPA, is it? Or is it-
Correct. Yep. Their virtual program.
No other discussions or questions? I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor say aye and raise your right hand. Aye. All those opposed say no and raise your right hand. Okay, motion passes. 5.06, we have Leslie Hamada to speak on Learn Platform, our new software purchase.
Good evening, President Ben Gosselin and Superintendent Watts, Ms. Halley and Board. Leslie Hamada, Covington resident. I sent an email out, so I'm just going to repeat that for the record, that when I saw this on the agenda, the first thing that came to mind, I wanted to know, what does it provide that we do not already have today? Number two, what are the concrete examples in other districts that proved valuable for this purchase? I mean, out of the blue, it's $50,000. I would like to see a copy of the actual contract. And is the total cost of 49, whatever it was, in some odd amount under 50,000, is that the initial starting cost, or is that going to just be the opening up and ongoing renewal of contract cost? And I do appreciate some answers to those questions. Thank you very much.
All right. I'd like to ask a board member to make a motion to approve 5.06, Learn Platform.
I move that we approve the Learn Platform contract for the 2019-20 school year in the amount of $49,161.42.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Motion has been made and seconded to approve a Learn Platform new software purchase. And of course, we have time for discussions or questions.
I see Tashawn standing and moving
Oh,
towards
yes.
the
My
mic.
hair.
So hopefully he'll have some of the answers for us.
So, what is it and why do you like it?
What
I have no
is
idea
it?
what it is.
All right. So it is actually a vetting, evaluation, documentation application for learning applications. So what we have across the country is about 9,500 different ed tech type of applications, and so in order to vet those is usually a challenge. You have to keep on top of contracts. You have to keep on top of service agreements and those types of things. And since student data privacy is becoming a target for people who write these types of apps, they actually use the free educational app in order to get at the student data. So this application does a lot of things like vetting the service contracts as well as vetting the service agreements for these applications to determine whether or not they are taking some of the student data so that we can see based on the apps that we have. It also incorporates some software review processes that can be multi-tiered. So it starts from, let's say, technology, moves through teaching and learning and other groups so that they can vet the applications as they're requested by teachers, and keeps a catalog of what those things are so that that is inward facing. Anyone can go and take a look at all the applications that we use as a system to determine how safe they are and where they apply. And then additionally, there's other options to have teacher vetting of the applications and recommendations to say that I've used this app does very well in these locations for these grade levels, and then that can be indexed. Currently, this is a manual process, and we can't necessarily keep on top of the changes in the contracts and the changes in the agreements that those corporations do, because those happen very often. As far as costs, the cost that we submitted was the total cost, but that's a total cost for about 4 modules, and we're going to do a stepped implementation. The first step is the listing of the applications and the review of the contract piece, and then there's additional modules as you go on. So that's the total cost for the entire package.
Is that for 1 year, or is it?
Yeah, it's for 1 year.
Like for the secondary year, will we expect about the same types of costs, or does it go, is part of that in implementation, and so the costs go down for the second year, or?
We're expecting about the same cost. The way that I was able to look at the cost is what would be the commensurate amount of time for someone to actually do the service contract review, reach out to the vendors to say that these pieces don't necessarily align, and do some of that vetting piece. And this is way more cost effective. And a comparison application that we received a request, reached out to, was about $89,000 for the same thing. A little bit less feature set with what this is.
The second bullet item there, Tashawn, says track each service's return on investment measured against student learning outcomes and teacher feedback. Return on investment, is that specific to us, or is it in general?
So there's one of the modules, so that stepped implementation, that's the last step because it requires some system changes in the way that we do application tracking and adding things to browsers in order to track that. So that's the last step. But the return on investment is, let's say that there's a pilot for a certain software application. It can tell you how much the application is being used, in what ways, so that you can track whether or not your investment is actually has any impact on direct use, and then you can tie that to other data.
Do we have an idea of how is this selected, and the contract isn't there? I think that's one of the concerns.
So the application in this space, there's only really two people. It's LearnEd and this company. And when we did a side-by-side comparison of the needs that would replace portions of our software review process and walk through features and feature set according to cost, this is the one that won between those two comparisons. We can get the contract. The contract included some pretty specific language about confidentiality and things like that, but we're working all of that out. Additionally, we were able to get some very specific discounts and have those tiered across multiple years.
Okay, that would be good to put out.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Tashawn. Any other questions? All right, thank you. So at this point, we will call for a vote. All those in favor say aye and raise your right hand. Aye. All those opposed say no and raise your right hand. All right, motion passes. 5.07 ATI Physical Therapy 2019-20 Revised Contract Athletic Training Service Agreement with Kent School District High Schools. I'd like to ask a board member to make a motion to approve, please.
I move that we approve the revised contract for the ATI physical therapy for the amount of $53,000.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
A motion has been made and seconded to approve our athletic training service agreement with our high schools with ATI Physical Therapy 2019-20 revised contract. Are there any discussions or questions?
How many?
Yes.
Does it involve just one person? Is that right? There's one athletic trainer?
This is, first of all, it is an addition or revision of a previous contract. It's additional training, so there'll be more specifically certified trainers provided for each one of the high schools specifically. There was a question, I think the last, one of the things, and I wanted to acknowledge our athletic director, Brian Smith, who's done an excellent job as he's transitioned into, hey, you can raise your hand. Excellent job just looking at our programs. We had this, but something he noticed is something that we need to implement right away, and as we looked at some risk factors and some things that we still needed in our district, especially district this size. So.
Good.
You bet.
All right. So calling for a vote, all those in favor say aye and raise your right hand. Aye. All those opposed say no and raise your right hand. The motion passes on 5.07. We are now up to our consent agenda. And first, let's see, I want to explain that we have a number of items here, many of which are renewals of contracts, and we intentionally asked to put them on the consent agenda at an item because of the sheer volume and volume or number of contracts here that are getting renewed. These have not come to the board in most cases in the past because of our threshold, contract threshold that we had to meet before it went in front of the board. And so we are at a $25,000 threshold on contracts, and so it is now coming to the board for approval. So at this time, are there any agenda items in the consent agenda you would like pulled for discussion? I have 6.02. And can't find the voucher one. Where is it? Is it in there? 6.47. 6.47.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anybody else?
No.
All right. Did we
Do we do
like a motion?
6.31?
Oops. Sorry, 6.3 what?
1, tableau.
Okay. All right. Yes, please. I'd like a motion to approve the consent agenda. Okay, go ahead.
I move that we approve the consent agenda less 6.02, 6.31, and 6.47.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda minus 6.02, 6.31, 6.47. Are there any discussions or questions? Hearing none. I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor say aye and raise your right hand. Aye. All those opposed say no and raise your right hand. Okay, motion passes. We will go to 6.02, which is inclusive education staffing contracts. Sorry, pardon me, 6.07, which is the inclusive education staffing contracts. Okay. So how do we do that?
I mean, it's been approved, you can certainly ask a question about
6.07, okay, okay, all right. So it's just mainly question. So for BlazerWorks, I'm just wondering if there's any evaluation done on the contractors that are assigned. Because I see we're getting 14 number of staff members here, psychologists, SPED teachers. So I wonder, because the budget itself said that we are actually not increasing our certificated staff for IE, I'm wondering if these staff members are replacements to people who have left, or why there are those 14 folks, but I'm not quite sure if they're all teachers. So I'm wondering, one, are they part of our budget, and how and where are they placed in our budget? And then it might be under contractual services, I'm not sure. And then two, are there evaluation being done on these contractors?
So yes, evaluations are done. They sort of become a part of our inclusive education team. When we are unable to find certificated folks who can step into these positions, or qualified folks to step into the positions, we sometimes have to contract with agency hires. And what we typically do, and I'll look at Mariah to kind of weigh in on this as well, is any agency placement, if it's a certificated position that they're stepping into, those positions stay posted, they stay active, and we continue to try to recruit KSD staff to be able to fill and step into those roles. So it is it's built into our budget. And the actual positions, SLP, OT, school psychs, and special education teachers.
Right, it just said 14, and it didn't say how it's broken down, so that's where I wasn't clear, because I know we're hiring 9 fewer teachers in the IE budget, but this is adding to it or replacing, it's not very clear, so, okay.
They're based on our student enrollment, they're the vacant positions that are currently available.
That's what I wanted to know. Okay, thank you. And I think in the future, it would be helpful to see the scope of work for the staffing contracts. You know, we don't always see that in these IE staffing contracts, scope of work.
Discuss exactly what you
Yeah,
want to see.
okay. And then that's all for our 6.07. Thank you. And then 6.31,
Tableau.
yeah.
I'm not really familiar with that. I've heard people mention Tableau, and it's always been sort of like in the term of past tense, like it was sort of not used anymore. And so I was just wondering, how is this used? And it's being expanded to more schools under what recommendation? What is it, and what recommendation is that?
So it's a tool that was purchased historically by the district several years ago. I think we've talked about this a couple of times, and I think 2012 was the first investment by the district, and kind of sat as more of a central admin tool to use. And so over the past year, we've expanded that use significantly. Our schools have become more familiar with using that to provide information to them in terms of a dashboard form of kind of fast facts around KSD. So they rolled out 3 this week for school-based leaders, talk about assessments, attendance, graduation assurances. And so it's a way for schools to kind of, when they're ready in the immediate moment, obtain information about how the district is doing, how their schools are doing, because it's connected to our Skyward system. So a lot of the information kind of rolls over from the night before so that they always have current information. And so the cost of this is somewhat in expanding and getting that data and information into schools' hands. And so the draw or drain or strain on the current server is the increased cost there. We also have intentions of making some of that forward-facing and putting some dashboards out on our website around climate survey, around fast facts about KSD, and some of those things as well. And so that's where that expense comes. There's a cost, I suppose, to using something that we've already purchased, and that's what this is reflecting. So I think that's fair. Is that okay?
School usage, is it mostly the administration in the school buildings that will be using it?
So right now it has become more, I'd say for the first time in a long time, it's in more school-based hands than it's ever been. The intention is for them to always have access. So the building of that pretty much happens with central admin staff. So the schools end up being users. So you may be familiar with that. You use that for some tools. We've tried to use that and show you some data with some things that was Tableau that we were using to show those visuals and graphics. We're going to move into that, using that more with our board and our public, so that we're making full use of our investments, period, across the district. And OSPI made the shift over the summer. It might be a point of frustration for some people who have been familiar with the old report card, but that's the tool that they've moved into using as well. It's a little more user-friendly. It is ADA compliant, so it allows us to meet some other things as well.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Herman.
And I'm going to step back because I think the next agenda item might be me too, so I'm just going to move over here.
All right. 6.47 on the vouchers. I wanted to ask about the travel that was done for this summer, and were there any special conferences, meetings? I was wondering what that was.
So I'll give a general, and then I'll defer to colleagues if you have specifics, because then maybe the general description will help understand. So the way the voucher report comes out, it is reflective of all of the reimbursements or payments that we've made that were received. It doesn't necessarily mean that the travel happened within that window. So what this voucher has highlighted for us and has given us an opportunity to reconsider is the timeline related to when a staff member submits a reimbursement related to the event. So what was unfortunately implied with this is that all of those events happened in July and August, and they did not. A lot of times staff and things happen and they have all year to submit those before the close of the fiscal year. So sometimes it is beneficial to a staff member, if I have plans or events for the summer, to get a nice reimbursement check to have at that time. And so that is more what is indicative of this than it is that all of this travel happened within that last month. Same thing for in-district travel. It's difficult to justify in-district travel when schools are closed. When a lot of those people who submitted those reimbursements for in-district travel happened as a part of their job, because we don't have district vehicles, so they use their personal vehicles and they resubmit mileage. It happened during the school year. They just submit it at the end of the school year to get that sum. So it's allowing us to have an opportunity to think about some procedural operational adjustments to maybe it's 30 days after the event, possibly, within the quarter, the fiscal quarter is how we do. So we're going to rethink some of that so it doesn't show up this way, because that's the way it appears and that's not at all the way it happened. As far as specific events, I don't know if any colleagues want to address a specific event, but they did not happen that way. So what we can get to you, if it is helpful, is when those actual events occurred. But I can tell you for a fact they did not all happen this summer. It's just when we received it and when it was paid, and that's what that voucher statement reflects.
It just stood out for me, so, but thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it. All right. So at this time, I'd like to ask a board member to make a motion to approve 6.02, 6.31, 6.47, please.
I move that we approve 6.02, 6.31, and 6.47.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, a motion has been made and seconded to approve 6.02 minutes, 6.31 our Tableau software, 6.47 vouchers. Are there any other discussions or questions? Hearing none, I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
All those opposed say no and raise your right hand. Your motion passes. 7.0, communication from the audience. And we do not have any other cards this evening, so we'll move to legislative update. Ross, anything?
Some. I mean, we're far away from the next legislative session, but WASDA is kind of this year-round advocacy model. I'll kind of give an idea of that. Of what we do is you look at what happened in your current legislative session, what you got done, what didn't get done, and they look at a priority setting. So every year, WASDA puts together priorities, advocates for them at the legislative level, and some stuff gets done, stuff doesn't get done. So, but this is a collaborative process. There's a legislative assembly for WASDA, basically all school districts, board members in Washington State. I'm gonna look at that now. I believe it's at the end of September. So it's the end of September in Spokane. They alternate between Spokane and Seattle. Basically, it's a legislative assembly where they reiterate positions that they have, introduce new proposals. They have a handbook for everybody, so I wanted to give kind of their 5 new proposals, position proposals they want to take. One on equity-based education system, the expansion of work-based learning opportunities, federal funding or seeking federal funding for civics education grants, fully funded staffing levels, as well as protecting students from gun-related violence, And so those are new proposals. There's existing proposals that are coming back. Obviously, we as a district have actual votes, if you will, in terms of voting for these positions, of what we will support. So I know there's what we support on our own, but the idea is that WASDA will come together on these positions and advocate for all legislatures on kind of behalf of all school district directors. So that assembly's in a month, but they're kind of putting together things now, looking at proposals. So the handbook's out there if you want to look at existing proposals, and obviously we'll know basically after the end of September what those new legislative priorities are. So that's my update.
All right, thank you. We do have Karen has sent a email around about attending. Last year, I was able to attend, and yes, our school district has a lot of votes, so it makes a huge difference if we attend or not. So I would encourage somebody to attend this year if possible. And, right, that's it for me. Denise?
So I don't have a lot. I know summer's kind of flown by, and so I, for one, am very excited that my kids are going back to school, so thank you so much for preparing. But I'm just really looking forward to a wonderful year. I appreciate all of the work that you all have put in over the last year. I know it was kind of a tough year, but you are appreciated, and I really, I hope you were able to get some rest this summer, and I hope that, I have a feeling this year will hopefully be less challenging, but just as impactful. So I just appreciate everyone that is watching, and I'm looking forward to an amazing year. So I wish you all the best for the first day of school tomorrow, and thank you for what you do for our kids every day.
Well, I'm glad to see that Justin Dennison is here, because I spoke with the bus driver yesterday, and he just was singing praises of our dispatchers. He said they are phenomenal, and they keep, I think he said, over 100 routes going, and he just couldn't say enough about them. So just kudos to your whole department and your dispatchers particularly. I want to thank everybody for the contributions to the Fill the Bus school supply drive that Communities in Schools partnered with us for. It's still going on. You can still contribute school supplies either at the Communities in Schools office down on, Gow. I can't remember what, I can just get there. I just remember what street it's on. And here too? Gow, okay. And on September 6th at the Western Washington Fairgrounds, you can donate supplies again to Communities in Schools, and that gets you free admission into the fair. So just saying, I'm going to be there helping to collect school supplies and put them together. Tomorrow, obviously, is the first day of school, and as a retired teacher, it has always been an exciting time, and as a board member, it's an exciting time. I know I would always lose sleep over it that night as a teacher, but it brings with us hopes and positive expectations for students, teachers, and parents. And my wish is for a really smooth start and a smooth continuation for all students, teachers, bus drivers, food service workers, maintenance staff, office personnel, building administrators, and central office personnel. If I missed anybody, you're included too. So I just hope everything goes really well, and I hope our enrollment is up. If you are interested in mentoring, you need to remember, or even any kind of volunteering in the school, you need to go in and re-sign up with the VIPS program. And if it's first time, just go to the website and go into the VIPS program. Mentoring, there's usually it's like a 2-hour training session, and we're going to have full-time site managers at all the middle schools now. And one at Neely O'Brien, and obviously there's still one at KPA. Karen does a wonderful job. Is there one at KM? I can't remember. No, there used to be, but I don't think there is anymore, and I'm not sure why. But anyway, you can talk with those people and tell them who you're interested in mentoring. I mean, if you're interested in mentoring some type of student or a student that's interested in something, and they'll match you up with interests, and that helps. So it's really worthwhile. I love being a mentor. My girls are having mixed success, but I'm keeping after them. My oldest one just returned from studying in the Netherlands with the criminal justice program at the University of Washington, and she's just coming back from Hawaii because she decided to reward herself with her 21st birthday. So she's coming back from Hawaii. So she's doing well. I think that's all I had. Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, no, it's been, a couple months since we last met in full. And I know we all got to tour the Y facility a couple weeks ago. And I've seen other people, they're doing lots of tours, and opens just in a couple weeks now. So that was fantastic. And I kind of seen, like all the work. I really like all the work, seeing all the work that's being done around the schools. So, I live by the Panther Lake, so that building is gone. Everything's being worked, so that property's being turned over as we speak, and it's turning it over into something new. Seeing the new buildings that are in place and are ready by the first day of school. Actually, was at Sue's Creek last night for the back to school event. Their multi-purpose room up, ready to go. And I also want to kind of talk about the feeling. I think parents are very happy to have their kids go back to school and get out of the house. But the teachers, paras, everyone we talked to at the back to school last night was very excited about the new year, very excited to get started and welcome kids back and bring stuff in. So I think we're all excited to get started. And we've got a lovely, perfect budget to do it. And so I think we can go forward from there.
So for me, it's nice to be back here. I know there were probably some rumors going around that I'd moved out of state. Not true. I still live here. I've had the opportunity, I guess, to spend a very hot and humid summer for work, but it's nice to be back. I do appreciate all the work that everyone has done over the summer, and you gain appreciation for different things as you're in different places. And I've really appreciated how our district handles technology to be able to allow me to participate while I wasn't actually in state. And so I did appreciate that. I know the floating head got to be kind of the joke, but I did really appreciate that opportunity. And I wanted to thank everyone for all the work they've done. I see some new faces in different positions, and so welcome to our district. We're glad you're here and in your new roles, and we're looking forward to working with you this year. And Dr. Watts, I appreciated your comments at the beginning as we're looking at this new school year and really focusing in on teaching and learning. And we all have an impact on our students every single day, regardless of what position we do. The decisions we make and the things we do impact our students. And I appreciate the thoughtfulness that our district employees put towards that. So I am looking forward to a great start of the new year, and thank you for all you do.
All right, I'd like to echo that. I want to thank our teaching and learning team for a fantastic conference this summer. I had the opportunity to spend a day and a half with our teachers and our paraeducators and learn with them. I'm so reminded that our board work is very much dependent on continuous learning, and it's very difficult to do this work if we don't understand what happens in the background. And so that day and a half was very fulfilling and empowering for me, sitting with our paras and our teachers, watching some of these things that we're approving, our software, not knowing what they do. We're approving things that we really don't understand how it's being used, and the power behind some of these things are phenomenal. And the expertise in the room, I'm just awed by how stellar our teaching and learning group is. And I am so excited. I feel like this year we need to spend, just sharing this earlier, just spend our time talking about what is happening in our classrooms. That's been long missing. We were addressing very important work in terms of our financial sustainability, but now it's time to really put focus on what is really important, which is our classrooms, our kids, and our educators, putting our focus there. And so I am looking forward to this year, and I thank everybody who's been contributing to this district. It's been a really tough year for everyone, and being at that conference, I just see so much opportunities for us to lead and also be engaged in the process next year. So thank you all for all you're doing, and I want to thank especially Danelle Chief West, for all the work you're doing and the team, the impactful team you built in this district. So thank you for that. I also want to remind everybody about the Kent Food Bank breakfast that's coming up October 11th. If you'd like to join us, we'd love to have you there again. And then we also have our YMCA opening on September 14th at 10 a.m., I believe. And there are a few other events I can't remember now, but we have our school's foundation. When is that? That's the day after, right? The 12th.
Yeah.
12th in the evening, our gala. And that is an amazingly fun event if you haven't been to. So please join us there. You can find it all on the website. And I want to thank everybody for coming today and also wishing you a great new school year, coming year. Thank you. Yes. We are adjourned.
Okay.